All right, let's start with some Bengals talk. You mentioned NFL free agency. The tampering period began on Monday. The new league year started on Wednesday, which basically means that these deals can become official. For the Bengals, there's been a lot of names thrown out there in terms of guys that have either re-signed or kind of small deals that they've signed to. But you mentioned that there hasn't been much in the way of splash deals for the Bengals. I don't think we need to go through all of these deals that they've done at this point. What's the most interesting ones that they've signed?
I guess bringing BJ Hill back at the cost, and it actually, if you look at the whole contract, it is a pretty good deal. It's 3 years, 33 mil, but they've done a pretty good job of structuring it. And I think it was a case of knowing what you know in him, even though he's going to be into his 30s. And then going out and signing a nose tackle, TJ Slayton. We're going to talk to him actually this afternoon. He's coming into town. So after this podcast, I'm going to go down and he's coming in. Samaje Perine's coming in. So I do think the one place they've added at least enough to make me feel comfortable, and I do think they'll spend a high draft pick on this position, is the tackle spot. You got two rotational nose tackles in Slayton, and he's probably more than a rotational guy. He's probably the guy. A DJ Reader light, if you will, even though he's not light, but a guy that the stats aren't going to pop off the page. I know some metrics have him rated very high against the run. PFF has him rated very low, so you can pick your poison on which one you like. And then, Chris Jenkins, you expect a little more out of him in year two, but you got BJ Hill as the fallback plan. Then you draft the guy. Suddenly you're five deep at defensive tackle. I'm good there. Bringing back Samaje Perine, it's funny. I did that exercise The Athletic did and wrote a couple of columns on it. One, bringing back the whole band, TJ, Trey, Jamar, and one where I didn't bring T back. And in both scenarios, I wound up signing Samaje Perine back for basically the cost. It was funny. They had him at $2 million. I think he signed for 2 years and $3.8 million. So it was perfect. It was the right price, and I think it's a good fit. But as we sit here on this Thursday, late morning going into early afternoon, I'm not so much puzzled that nothing's gone about, and we'll talk about Trey Hendrickson separately because I wrote a column on it yesterday, that not a lot of movement's been made there, but they've let that guard market shrink to the point of, boy, you better get Tevin Jenkins or Brandon Scherfer. I don't know what the hell you're doing at this point at guard, man.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there with what you just said. Let's start with the last thing. Is that the biggest glaring omission right now? The biggest thing that they needed to fix that they haven't done anything about is the guard position?
And then, yes, that, and then the determination of what do you do with Trey Hendrickson? Because, I still think you're in need of an edge rusher. Maybe you feel satisfied that you got Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, again, probably a first round or at least by the end of day 2 draft pick that you can feel can become a rotational piece there. But that's a nice rotational piece if Trey Hendrickson's still around. If Trey Hendrickson's not around, then you got to go to the free agent market. And the free agent market right now at edge rusher, most of the good ones have been snapped up. I mean, you're down to the Azeez Ojulari. No, thank you. I mean, he's an 8-sack guy. Good for him. I had 8-sack guys. I'm a little puzzled at those two position groups primarily, and then I'm still a little puzzled of what we're doing at linebacker with the whole. Are you cutting Jermaine Pratt and going to the market? Is Oren Burks really going to be a guy to compete for a starting job, or is he here to replace Akeem Davis-Gaither?
Well,
what's scratching my head more than anything else.
What's your take on that? Because I wanted to ask you about Oren Burks. That was one that I saw, and I was like, what's the plan there? Because you look at it, and it seems like special teamer almost, but then you see that he did play an important role in the postseason for the Eagles this year. Is that one where you think maybe the Bengals saw something on film and say, hey, this is exactly what we want for our defense and Al Golden's system, and we think he can be a Akeem Davis-Gaither replacement as that third linebacker?
Yeah, we haven't got a chance to talk to coaches about that, but I think to your point, Rick, I think that's exactly the point. That at the very worst case scenario, right, he replaces Akeem Davis-Gaither tit for tat. Good special teams guy, perfect third linebacker, backup guy. That's what Akeem was. Akeem obviously decided to go to Arizona and get a chance to be a starter there. So I think there's a little bit of that of, what will you do to have him come in and compete? But, maybe at the end of the day, they still think they can get some mileage out of Jermaine Pratt. I still think he's going to be a cap casualty. I think at that point you'll see another linebacker brought in, but it hasn't happened yet. And at this point, maybe Burks is the guy that pushes Pratt, or they roll. Here's the other part that's at the moment that's coming into a little focus here. That Duke Tobin at the Combine said, I don't want to just pay to bring the band back, right? But it feels like that's kind of what they're doing on defense, at least.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, do they think that, you know what? This was all Lou Anarumo's fault. Our new guy is going to fix all of this. Okay. I mean, we're going to find that out, I guess, if that's where we're standing with all this.
That would be concerning if that's the mindset there. Going back, you talked about Samaje Perine a little bit. Obviously, I understand the fit there. It makes sense. But is there any bit of wanting to get a guy that was in the Chiefs organization back? Just like, do you think there's a little bit of stealing some secrets going on there to bring him back?
I don't. I think it's more familiarity with the guy that, listen, they didn't want him to leave here 2 years ago when he went to Denver, right? And I think Denver promised him a bill of goods of, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of snaps. And then he became the third running back there. And he fit a great role for Kansas City last year. I think he had 50 receptions, and we always know him as a great pass blocker. I just think when he left, it was, all right, Joe Mixon's the guy here. He's clearly the guy, even though Samaje get more snaps in that 2022 AFC Championship game than Joe Mixon got. But I think the writing for him was on the wall, and I think he was promised something in Denver that he didn't get, and so the perfect fit to come back in a system that he knows and players that he knows and a comfortability factor. So no, I don't think it's for intel purposes.
There was that video that went viral after the Super Bowl of Pat Mahomes dapping up like 3 or 4 of his teammates. Samaje Perine was right there at the end of that group, and Pat Mahomes passed right over him to go dap up someone else, like just left him hanging as Samaje stood up to give him a handshake. You think the slight from Pat Mahomes is what sent Samaje Perine packing, saying, I'm going back to Cincinnati?
Maybe that was the final straw. That's exactly what it wasn't. Maybe opportunity. It was Pat Mahomes dissed him, and he said, "To hell with this place."
And maybe he's had enough of Brittany Mahomes or whatever her name is. People don't like her either. The tight end position, though, Skinny. Mike Gesicki re-signed, and they also re-signed Tanner Hudson. Any thoughts on what they're doing there at the tight end spot?
No, I think that's exactly what I put down on paper. I would have done too. Obviously Eric All's going to miss the year. I'm guessing that they may not have brought Tanner Hudson back if All was healthy. I do think they always plan to bring Gesicki back because I think they treat him like a third wide receiver more than they treat him like an inline tight end, and that's fine. And so now you're set at the tight end spot. It's Gesicki, it's Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, Cam Grandy got snaps last year as a fourth guy. Tanner McLaughlin's still around if he can develop, and maybe you waste a late pick, although they only have 6 draft picks at the moment. So I think to their credit, they're set at tight end in my opinion, and they did a good job by bringing Gesicki back.
You guys did get to talk to Gesicki, and it was a pretty good exchange there with the media that he had. I mean, this seems like a guy that is genuinely thankful, happy to be in the position that he's in, and he had a couple good anecdotes to kind of go with that of one, him hearing Joe Burrow talk about him nationally when he was doing that interview tour during Super Bowl week, and he's saying, yeah, we need Mike G back, and Mike's there. I think he's talking about me. I thought that was pretty funny. And then he had the text from T Higgins that said, nah, Mike is rich. I guess what I'm getting at is I kind of gained some respect for Mike Gesicki this week. I thought he had a good week in the public eye. He was fun to hear from.
Yeah, no, he's exactly what the doctor ordered at that spot. And it's funny, the way they've done that tight end position, everybody's been critical of it, but they've hit on it. They hit on it with Gesicki last year. They brought him back. They hit on it with Hayden Hurst for that 1 year. They let CJ play out the final year of his contract, and he played really well that
They missed year. 1 year on what's his
Irv Smith. That's right, Irv Smith. They missed on Irv Smith. And actually, Irv Smith being so bad allowed you to throw Tanner Hudson in there and then go,
we got
okay. Yeah.
Okay, so Skinny, we've kind of talked about the moves that have been made to this point. You mentioned the lack of going after a guard to this point. So what's next? I mean, do you think they still have some big moves to come here, or are we kind of just playing this out, adding a few more guys to get the band back together, and then moving into the next period, which is the draft?
Yeah, they're going to have to add a starting guard, and I think it's Brandon Scherf and Tevin Jenkins are the 2 main guys left. I mean, you can't roll into training camp with trying to pick 2 guys out of the following 3 to be your starting guards: Cordell Volson, Jackson Kirkland, Cody Ford. Could Cordell bounce back with a new offensive line coach? Maybe, but that can't be your plan of hoping that happens and hoping that, they like Jackson Kirkland, but he's taken all of 2 NFL snaps in his career. And I think Cody's a perfect backup guy that you don't feel good about starting 17 games, but if he's got to start, I mean, he was a Swiss Army. He started at left tackle, he started at right tackle, he started at guard. He actually started a game as a third tight end. So he has value, and I think it's a good guy to bring back, especially at the price. But you need a starter at guard, and it can't be, well, we're going to go get somebody early. I mean, at this point, you need to give a lot of guys early in the draft. That's the one that puzzles me. And then obviously, again, the elephant in the room is what is going to happen with Trey Hendrickson, in my opinion. I know everybody thinks it's Jamar and T. I think Jamar gets done. You know where the price point is. They know where the price point is. At this point, just get it done. The T1, we'll just see where the finances go. The Trey one to me is interesting, Rick. And I wrote a column on this yesterday in which, so the Bengals allowed him to go seek a trade. And I think it's the right thing to do. Go find out what your market value is. But at the same time, we also, in addition to that team willing to pay you, we want compensation back. And I think as Albert Breer was the first to report this on Monday on SI.com, their national columnist of, the Bengals, the Trey camp said, yeah, we think we can get a first round pick back. And apparently teams have said, no. The Bengals want at least the second round. And I think they're asking for a first round. The Athletic reported today that teams say the Bengals asking price is outrageous. It should be outrageous. You aren't going to just give him away because you know what you can do. And this was the point of my column. And I know people are going to go, that's not fair. That's not right. He's under contract for 2025 with the Bengals. In a worst case scenario, you say, guy, you sought the market. You found a couple of teams willing to pay you, but they weren't willing to give us what we wanted. We did what we said. You asked, extend me or trade me. We tried to trade you. It didn't work out. You're under contract. You can pout all you want. He can miss OTAs. He can miss whatever he wants in camp. But you know what these guys have to do, Rick, even though they fuss about this stuff? You want
show up to get paid.
26? Go ball out again.
Yeah, I've had enough of Trey Hendrickson, to be honest, and a big reason for it is
I don't blame Rick.
I do, because you know why? Because he did the same stuff last year. If he wouldn't have done it last year, then maybe I'd be willing to sit here and listen to him do it this year. But you made no sense. You exposed yourself as a dummy who's selfish and only in it for yourself last year. Now that you're doing this again, you're just a distraction, man. You're just a problem. And granted, you're very good, so hopefully it all works out and you can sit out and you come back and you ball out and you get your money next year and all will be forgiven. But right now, like I'm done hearing from Trey Hendrickson. He's an idiot. Yeah,
the only thing I will say in defense, if the sides were coming close maybe 2 weeks ago in the high 20s, I'm just surmising this. And suddenly he wakes up on March, whatever that was, a week ago, when March 4th or 5th, and finds out Max Crosby signed for $35 million per year. And then by the end of the weekend, oh, by the way, Myles Garrett signed for $40 million. He's not in the Myles Garrett category, but go compare numbers. He's in the Max Crosby territory. So suddenly the market just went boom. And for those in that camp of, well, the Bengals should have signed him earlier, here's the part to what you're saying that I would blame Trey. I don't blame Trey at the moment. Listen, he made his demand. The Bengals met the demand. Okay, go see if you can find a trade. They've tried. It hasn't worked to this point. He's found maybe a couple teams willing to pay, but again, they're not willing to give the Bengals the compensation the Bengals want. And again, that's the part for the Bengals. They can say, thanks, but no thanks. We want more than that. If you're not willing to do it, we're not going to trade the guy because we still have him under contract. The part for me that would have been interesting, Rick, is let's just assume for argument's sake that 2 weeks ago, the sides had come to terms on an extension, and it was in the average 28 mil category, probably more than I thought that he was going to get. I mean, Spot Rack has his valuation at 28, over the cap has it at 30, 31. So we're in that category, right? Let's just say he would have signed that deal. Probably fair market value for both at that time. What do you think he would have done once he saw the Max Crosby deal get done?
Probably the same thing he did right after he signed his 2-year extension last time. He asked for a trade immediately. Like, that's my issue with him. He doesn't have any respect for the process. Like, if he would have showed that he understood how it worked last year when he had just signed a new extension and been like, well, sucks, but that's the way it works. I signed my deal when I signed it. I've got to eat this for at least another year. Then maybe I'd be willing to listen to him asking for a trade this year and saying, hey, look at some of these deals. Look at what I've done the last 2 seasons. But that's not how it worked. He's whining every year, including right after he had just signed an extension.
And here's the problem of just trading him for trade's sake. Again, let's just say it's a 2nd round and a 5th round pick. I'm just going to throw those two.
Don't do that.
I wouldn't do that either. Because listen, if you take him off this roster with what you currently have and what the market has out there, and yes, could you maybe go draft an edge in the 1st round that could be maybe, but I'm not going to
the NFL in sacks.
Right. I've got that guy on my roster. And you know what? He's under contract for this year. And if after this year, maybe they draft an edge, right? And the edge shows something. And now I got some guys that are edges in the pipeline. We'll fix this next offseason. But right now, we don't have the space to fix it. We don't have the money to pay him in the mid-30s. We might have had money in the high 20s, but we don't have it in the mid-30s. At that point, you just say, guy, you're under contract. You're part of this football team. Go get your money next year. And then if you really want to be I don't even think it's a dick move. It's part of the CBA. Know what you could do in 2026?
Tag him. Yeah. And Skinny, they already need another edge to replace Hubbard. So it's not like, I mean, this idea of drafting is backup and you like all of a sudden you've got an extra guy. Now that's not the case. You already need another edge. So
and maybe he comes back.
He's going to be back.
And yeah, and maybe he comes back and the Bengals do him a solid, and he says, "All right, just extend me for a year so I can get some more money up front. I'll take this, and we'll figure this out later. We'll revisit this next offseason." And maybe they both do each other a solid in that regard.
Trey Hendrickson is not intelligent enough to think that way or figure that out. They did. You had already mentioned this, that they had re-signed Joseph Osai. Cam Sample also re-signed now. What are your thoughts on kind of the guys in-house? I was a little surprised that they even brought back Joseph Osai. They obviously already have Miles Murphy. Doesn't seem like there's much optimism about either one of those guys.
Well, I tell you what, they were really happy with how Osai played down the stretch. And honestly, if you look at his numbers, he did play really well down the stretch. It was almost like all the injury stuff is behind him. The light bulb's starting to go off, sense of urgency. And so I think it'll be another sense of urgency because it's only a 1-year deal. I go back to the marketplace at edge rusher dried up really quick. The handful of guys that were out there got plucked, and there was a handful that were outpriced that you weren't going to go sign because they were too much. They cost too much. And now you're to that 6 to 8 sack guy that's out there. Well, Joseph Osai, in my opinion, can be a 6 to 8 sack guy, and maybe Miles Murphy can be a 6 to 8 sack guy. I'm not holding out hope for that, but maybe. And so I'm not going to go spend for that. I'll go bring back a guy I know, and then we'll go draft on top of that. So to me, I think the plan on the defensive line has been fine so long as you just don't give Trey Hendrickson away.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm okay with that. And again, it just goes back to the point of he's not leaving because there's nobody out there to go get. You can't replace Trey Hendrickson right now, and that's the biggest issue the Bengals would have if they were to trade him. Cap space, do you feel like they're still in a good spot there? They've got some room to work with if they need it?
For a guard, the linebacker would be tit for tat. If Pratt gets cut, probably whatever price tag you pay for that guy. And I still think they need to add a veteran safety. It'd probably, unfortunately, be a bargain basement third guy or a guy that could push a Geno Stone. I know Al Golden at the Combine really spoke pretty glowingly of Jordan Battle. He didn't speak so glowingly of Geno Stone, but he talked about Geno being a starting point. So when you hear starting point, it means that there's probably they want somebody else in the mix. So hopefully they add to the back of that room, not even the back of that, add to that mix of a third safety-ish position.
What else have you seen around the NFL that might be interesting to note for Bengals fans?
Well, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings got really good. They went and got the trenches fixed on both sides of the ball. I think there's a lot of craziness in the marketplace. I think a lot of guys that defensive end stuff just got crazy to me. The fact of Max Crosby getting what he got, then Miles getting what he got, that just blew that market out of the water to insanity, in my opinion. And that's the part of the NFL that sometimes leaves me scratching my head. Do you think the Raiders are a good organization? Do you think the Browns are a good organization? So just because they were willing to make stupid moves, does that mean you got to follow suit? I know it's because that's what the market says. Doesn't mean you got to do it.
Yeah, and oftentimes that's what gets teams into trouble is them chasing those types of moves and getting desperate after the fact. So I think there is value in being proactive and being the team to go out and get your guy and maybe overspend a little bit to get the guy you want. But being the team that's chasing the tail and being like, well, everyone else did it, so now we got to go get a guy and overspend for someone who's not the guy you wanted. I don't think that makes any sense at all.